Hello. Today's topic is we must crush the anti-state forces plot to overthrow the state and dismantle and destroy the Chinese Communist Party. Hello, this is Jeong Cheong-rae, the representative of the Indo-Pacific Strategy Institute in Republic of Korea. I would appreciate it if you could forward this letter to President Trump and his staff. My email address is as below. If you want to contact me, please send me an email. I am a former case officer of the National Intelligence Service of the Republic of Korea, and I was a secret case officer who mainly dealt with North Korea and Chinese issues on the ground. I graduated from the Department of Chinese Language and Literature at Seoul National University and received a master's degree in Chinese simultaneous interpretation from the Graduate School of Interpretation and Translation at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, and mainly worked in China, the America, and Asia regions. I am always grateful to honorable American parents who sent 1,789,000 American soldiers during the Korean War, and to the American taxpayers who invested $68 billion to rebuild the shattered Republic of Korea. And thanks to the missionary sent from the United States 130 years ago, the concept of individual freedom was included in the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. President Seungman Lee, who founded the Republic of Korea, received a bachelor's degree from George Washington University, a master's degree from Harvard University, and a doctorate from Princeton University. As a result, the Constitution of the Republic of Korea was created in direct imitation of the Constitution of the United States. Currently, South Korea and the United States are under attack simultaneously from the Roman Catholic Jesuit and the Chinese Communist Party, the Democratic Party of Korea, and the Democratic Party of the United States have the same policies and are focused on suppressing individual freedom and achieving a totalitarian, dictatorial society. The Democratic Party of Korea is filled with followers of the Chinese Communist Party, the Jesuit, and North Korea. Even if Korean companies want to make a large-scale investments in the United States, the Democratic Party linked Korean Confederation of Trade Union and social groups fiercely oppose them, making it difficult for Korean companies to make a large-scale investment in the United States. Also, even if Korea wants to purchase more Alaskan gas and oil than it does now, the Democratic Party of Korea and the Korean Confederation of Trade Union are blocking it. The Democratic Party of Korea members who were elected through fraudulent election are constantly creating pro-China bills in Korea, working to turn Korea into a colony of the Chinese Communist Party. In order to bring down the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, which seeks to strengthen the Korea-United States alliance, the Democratic Party of Korea has proposed impeachment bills a total of 29 times, impeaching the President, Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, Chairman of the Board of the Audit and Inspection, and prosecutors. The Democratic Party of Korea, which come to power through fraudulent elections, is committing atrocities such as impeaching the Minister of Justice, the Chief Prosecutor of the Central District Prosecutor's Office, prosecutors, and the Chairman of the Board of Audit and Inspection who were investigating their corruption. The leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, is currently on trial for remittances to North Korea, and his accomplice Lee Hwa-yeon, who remitted money to North Korea, has already been found guilty. He must serve 7 years and 8 months in prison. On March 26th, Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, is expected to be found guilty in the second trial for violating the election law. If the second trial finds him guilty, the Supreme Court will make a final ruling within 3 months, but it is unlikely that the result will be easily overturned. If that happens, Lee Jae-myung will no longer be able to maintain his qualifications as a member of the National Assembly. Lee Jae-myung is under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York on charge of using Ethereum cryptocurrency to send money to North Korea. Lee Jae-myung violated the U.S. sanctions against North Korea, so I hope the U.S. prosecutors will indict him and bring him to a U.S. court. In addition, Jeong Cheong-rae, who is currently the chairman of the Legislation and Judiciary Committee of the Democratic Party of Korea, led the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. If you look at the first impeachment article he wrote, the reason for the impeachment was that President Yoon Suk-yeol distanced himself from North Korea, China, and Russia and became close to Japan. After the first attempt failed, a second impeachment attempt was made, resulting in the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. In 1989, Jeong Cheong-rae attempted to prevent the signing of the Korea-US FTA by breaking into the U.S. ambassador's residence and kidnapping and killing the U.S. ambassador. However, the kidnapping of the U.S. ambassador failed because the ambassador was sleeping and evacuated in his pajamas while the staff at the ambassador's residence resisted. Jeong Cheong-rae broke into the U.S. ambassador's residence and detonated one homemade bomb, then detonated 2 more bombs at the security guard who ran to him after hearing the explosion. Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 other terrorists climbed over the wall of the ambassador's residence and approached the ambassador's residence, which was 100 meters away from the wall, and broke the glass window with a prepared iron pipe before entering the reception room inside the residence. At the time, about 20 embassy staff members and family members, including the ambassadors and his wife, were sleeping in the residence. Jeong Cheong-rae and the terrorists attempted to open 6 doors connected to the reception room in order to kidnap the ambassador and his wife. But while embassy staff locked the doors and stood in a standoff, the ambassador and his wife were able to escape the residence safely in their pajamas. They sprayed thinner on the living room carpet and attempted to set it on fire, but fortunately, it did not catch fire. So, no large-scale fire occurred. Jeong Cheong-rae and the terrorists held the embassy staff hostage for about 45 minutes before being arrested by the Korean police. Jeong Cheong-rae and 5 other terrorists were sentenced to 2 years in prison for violating the National Security Act in South Korea and served their sentences. However, at that time, South Korea required adult male to serve 3 years in the military, so Jeong Cheong-rae gained 1 year of time. However, Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 terrorists at the time were not brought to a trial in the United States courts and were not punished under U.S. law. Therefore, Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 terrorists should be immediately indicted and arrested by the U.S. prosecutors on charge of breaking into the U.S. ambassador's residence on the morning of October 13, 1989, attempting to kidnap and murder the U.S. ambassador, setting off a bomb, breaking windows with an iron pipe, spraying thinner to set fire, and taking hostage staff at the U.S. ambassador's residence. Freeze all financial assets of Jeong Cheong-rae and the terrorists and incarcerate them in the prison recently secured by the United States in El Salvador. Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 terrorists still have great influence in the leftist political circles of Korea. Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 other terrorists committed acts of terrorism, such as climbing over the wall of the ambassador's residence and detonating a bomb with the intention of assassinating and kidnapping and the ambassador, but they were not tried in a U.S. court and received no punishment from the U.S. As a result, college students who are engaged in anti-American movement have continued to climb over the walls of the U.S. Embassy and ambassador's residence until recently. If the fact that Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 terrorists were punished under American law and imprisoned in an El Salvadorian prison after 36 years spreads in Korean society, anti-American protest will be largely eliminated. And if Lee Jae-myung is brought to court in the United States for violating American financial sanctions, and Jeong Cheong-rae and the 5 terrorists are brought to court in the United States, the Democratic Party of Korea will be annihilated in Korea. Moon Jae-in, former leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, also violated sanctions against North Korea dozens of times during his presidency. We hope that the U.S. prosecutors will immediately indict him and bring him to a trial in the United States. Moon Jae-in is pushing for a constitutional amendment to abolish the American-style presidential system and replace it with a cabinet system through their minions. If the constitutional amendment to a cabinet system is made in Korea, a person who receives orders from the Chinese Communist Party will become the prime minister, and Korea will become a colony of the Chinese Communist Party. Japan's political chaos and Canada's pro-China stance are side effects of the cabinet system. The reality in Great Britain is also bleak, and if Korea's constitution is amended to a cabinet system, Korea's situation will also become bleak, and the United States will have to fight China alone. Therefore, please designate the Democratic Party of Korea as a terrorist group linked to North Korea and impose financial sanctions on the Democratic Party of Korea's political fund bank account. And please issue an Interpol warrant for all Democratic Party of Korea lawmakers and party members. Then, the communist forces that connected to North Korea and China in South Korea will collapse down, and President Yoon Suk-yeol will be able to purchase more Alaskan energy than he does now. More Korean companies will also be able to participate in Alaskan energy development project. Not only that, many Korean companies will be able to invest freely in the United States. In addition, South Korea's defense budget will be able to be doubled from the current level. Currently, the annual budget for leftist groups is about $100 billion. And if the Democratic Party of Korea is designated as a terrorist group linked to North Korea and disbanded, half of the budget for leftist groups can be converted to defense spending, increasing South Korea's defense budget to $100 billion per year. In addition, the South Korean government will be able to provide 100% of the $3.5 billion for stationing U.S. troops in South Korea to the United States. If the Democratic Party of Korea disappears, President Yoon Suk-yeol will be able to better pursue anti-China policies and bring down China more easily and quickly. I do appreciate it if you could make an effort to have United States prosecutors immediately indict Moon Jae-in Lee Jae-myung and Jeong Cheong-rae. And please designate the Democratic Party of Korea as a terrorist organization linked to the North Korea. If this becomes a reality in the near future, the pro-China forces in Korea will be destroyed, and the ROK and U.S. alliance will automatically be strengthened. The United States will be able to easily bring down the Chinese Communist Party, and President Trump will be able to attract more Korean companies to the United States. It will also enable more Alaskan energy to be sold to Korea, and the Korean companies will be able to participate more in Alaskan energy development. Currently, South Korea is under attack by spies from China and North Korea. Hybrid warfare is getting worse day by day, and unrestricted warfare is spreading widely. So, the United States can fully intervene according to the Article 3rd of the ROK and U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty, revised on November 1st, 2024. I'd like to emphasize that the United States is designating the Democratic Party of Korea as a terrorist organization and arresting its politicians for violating sanctions against North Korea is not interference in internal affairs. Thank you for listening. I sincerely wish the United States of America and the free Republican patriot a complete success in completing the new golden age of America. May God's grace and blessings always and everywhere be abundant. Thank you again. God bless you.